Ultimate performance to me seems like the pinnacle of diet and nutrition, in particular body transformation. These before and afters, which are just a complete turnaround, a physical transformation. How does it happen? How does it work?
The before and after pictures, as you mentioned, are certainly eye-catching, certainly life-changing. They've also had significant improvements in their health, managing injuries or improved energy.
How much of it is food related?
Lots of people go to the gym, lots of people exercise, but nutrition is often the piece that's missing.
What are some of the most common kind of things that trip people up the most when it comes to diet and exercise? Is it, convenience foods or fast foods? What's the most common one you'd see?
A classic example would be managing blood sugar is one of the key components of a successful body composition. Often when somebody feels hungry, they're dehydrated as well. That's quite common in Singapore, of all places.
Do you find that there's a place for education in social media? Is it just full of misinformation? Hi, my name is Amy and this is What's on Your Plate by The Meat Club. Each week, we dive into real conversations about what we eat, why it matters, and how to build a better plate one bite at a time. If you enjoy the show, hit like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Instagram at The Meat Club SG. Let's dive into the episode. Today we have Chris Richards, the Managing Director of Ultimate Performance Singapore. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming. As you know, your Orchard Road studio is actually below our office building. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, very strategically placed, yes. So I've been in Singapore nearly 10 years. I've been with UP almost 13 years. I have a background as a personal trainer originally, but transitioned into obviously developing the UP business across APAC and Middle East, and a passion for helping people with their health and fitness.
Fantastic. Ultimate performance to me seems like the pinnacle of diet and nutrition, and in particular body transformation. For anyone else that has seen your account on Instagram, it's like these before and afters, which are just a complete turnaround, a physical transformation. How does it happen? How does it work?
Yeah, we've definitely put a lot of hard work over the years. We've got, many kind of successful client stories, and the before and after pictures, as you mentioned, are certainly eye-catching, certainly life-changing. There's a lot more that goes on behind those stories as well. So we've seen many cases where clients have had the visual change, but they've also had significant improvements in their health, improvements of managing injuries or improved energy, managing stress. So that's always very rewarding when we see our clients have that life-changing change to their lifestyle, and it definitely has been very rewarding.
I can only imagine. So when you just mentioned in terms of their physical health as well, so appearance and aesthetics is one thing. What are some of the biggest shifts that you see in terms of their overall health and improvement of life quality, I guess?
Absolutely. So there's many examples where clients have reduced cholesterol, reduced blood pressure. They've been able to go off of medication, obviously in sort of communication with their doctors, and that's been fantastic. Where they've not had to rely on these different long-term medications, but they've been able to do that through diet and exercise. That's
amazing. So what's a common protocol? Is it a cookie cutter approach? Is it all very specific to the individual? If I was to walk into your center, how would it all work?
Absolutely. So we've gained lots of experience over the years, so we know what works. And sometimes it is the basics that works, but it's doing that in a way that's tailored to the individual. So we do various assessments at the beginning to understand a client, their background, their challenges, their goals. And that allows us to then develop a plan that's realistic for their lifestyle. Many of our clients travel a lot, myself included. I'm able to work with our clients to think about, okay, how can we support you when you're here? If you're on the road, you could potentially train in one of our other UP locations around the world. And then we're able to make sure that their training frequency complements their goals.
Amazing. So I imagine training is one aspect of it, and you can run us through that. But how much of it is food related?
It's a huge part of it. So, clients typically will train 3 times a week on average. So 3 hours out of your week is not a huge amount of time. And it then comes down to the choices that you make, the habits that you build outside of the gym that are key to success. Lots of people go to the gym, lots of people exercise, but nutrition is often the piece that's missing. And there's lots of well-intentioned efforts around nutrition where somebody is quote unquote eating healthily. However, the calories or the breakdown of the macros, including the protein, the fat, the carbohydrates that person consumes is not necessarily optimal for their goal. And sometimes those efforts are not always rewarded. So that's a huge part of how we support our clients, is devising a nutrition plan that works for them. Again, whether it's something they can cook themselves, help at home, whether they're on the road, in a restaurant, we're able to educate and advise.
So I guess for a lot of those people that are traveling, as you mentioned, executives that are flying all over the world, making sure that they're making the right choices when they're dining out is just as important as meal preparation at home, I imagine.
Absolutely. And it's an education where it's not that you cannot do these things or you cannot have a social life. It's how do you make the best choices on a menu? How do you start to understand that there's leaner cuts of meat or fish? There's obviously different choices that you can make. There's calories that can be saved strategically through the day or through the week so that your average intake is still controlled. That allows you to still hit your goals, but still meet your clients or spend time with your family.
I love that. You talked about lean meat. Was not all meat created equally?
Correct. So in terms of the breakdown of that, the protein, the fat, there is definitely variation. Fat often gives us some of the flavor. So the fattier meats can often be the most popular.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that there cannot be a balance between the two. And again, it depends on your goal, depends on the balance of the rest of your meals and your rest of your intake that, would advise what would be the most sensible approach that somebody takes.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the higher fat meats, there's typically a higher calorie load.
I imagine in terms of, fuel intake, there is definitely that, and I don't count calories myself, but I guess you're balancing, what you're taking in as versus what you're putting out. How do they go about measuring that?
Absolutely. So many of us have desk jobs of one description or another. So, that potential sedentary lifestyle is a factor, and we do assess how much somebody typically moves within a day. Obviously, that's an encouragement as part of the process that everyone's talked or heard about counting their steps. That's a simple, basic way to set goals based on where you're at, make it achievable, that then you can increase that over time. And that allows for more activity. But then outside of that, then encouraging other ways to be active throughout your week. And obviously, as somebody gets fitter and stronger, we quite often see that they might achieve their visual transformation, and that's amazing. And then they start to focus more towards health goals, fitness goals, whether it be high rocks is very popular at the moment. It could be a strength goal. It could be a sport that they used to play when they were younger that they can then take back up again because they've gained that fitness and that ability to do so. And then all that contributes to their overall activity. You
mentioned that a lot of people, come back to sports that they used to do, which I find interesting. So is that because they've just kind of not necessarily lost their way, but, other priorities have taken over, and so they can regain, I guess, their time? Or is it just being able to be functionally able to do it again?
A little bit of both. So as you mentioned, the clients that we typically work with have been successful in their own right in their careers. They've focused on that potentially more than their health for the last number of years to build their careers and get to the position that they're in. But because of that, they've then lost their way from their health and fitness perspective. So it's a case of getting back to that ability to potentially do some of those sports. And then, losing that, kind of love or passion for the sport because they lost their health and fitness can come back often when they feel fit and strong and confident again.
I like that. I actually recently tried my hand at netball again in an adults competition. I used to play basketball as a kid. You might find that hilarious, but I actually found that the propensity to injure yourself was too great a risk for me to continue. So whilst I loved it, I actually didn't continue. So I'm the opposite. But just, you mentioned, they're training in your outlets 3 times a week. So for up to 3 hours during that week, and every other moment in time is up to their own decision making. So apart from their own incidental exercise, I guess the biggest part is just that education around food. So how do you go about teaching someone about what is the right food choices to be making to kind of hit the goals that you guys have in mind for them?
Cool. So we developed our own app at UP, which does different things, but one of the main things it allows us to do is for somebody to track their own food in a sort of food diary format, but they can also then take pictures and communicate that with their trainer to cross-check and get feedback on those meals. There's also the bar code scanning function where they can obviously do that more effectively and efficiently to include those meals into their food tracking.
Okay.
That's one way that gives us very detailed and clear insight into what somebody's eating. And then from there, depending on the goal, as always, then we can make adjustments or recommendations on how they can make changes. For some people, that's not realistic, so we would also then use simply just occasional pictures to get a reference point.
Yeah.
Some people are very habitual, so they eat the same thing every day.
Yeah.
So that works quite well when you're able to then, okay, how do we tweak that, or how do we work that that's our set point, that's our base?
Yeah.
How do we make adjustments around that?
What are some of the, when you mentioned a barcode before, so the app scans a barcode, what are some of the most common kind of, I wouldn't say problems, but some of the things that trip people up the most when it comes to diet and exercise? Diet in particular. What are some of the food categories or groups? Is it, convenience foods or fast foods that they are scanning and you're like, yes, that's on the table, or no, that shouldn't be? What's the most common one you'd see?
So a classic example would be, let's say, a salad, which, would be potentially the kind of the quote unquote healthy option, or the kind of the assumed low calorie option in lots of cases. But where that often falls down is the sauce or the oils that are accompanying that.
Yeah.
So one easy strategy with any kind of meal where there's sauce involved is to ask for the sauce on the side.
Okay.
That allows you then to choose not to use it at all, or to be more sparing with that. Whereas if you've got, an oil-based sauce on a salad and you've got it completely glazed and covered, there can be hundreds and hundreds of calories in that, which, doesn't fill you up, particularly, but has a huge calorie load. And you eat a salad, feel like you've done your thing, that you should be on track, and then the goal or the weight loss or the fat loss or the outcome isn't achieved often. So that's a very common one, that that education of, okay, we need to be more mindful in that area. And then the other, I guess, main area would be similar, but it'd be around cooking oil, how something's prepared. So again, if you cook something at home and you use 1 small teaspoon or tablespoon of oil, it's not very much. And then if you free pour it, the number of calories again there are several hundred often. So again, if you're outside, if you're in a restaurant, then that's the part that's harder to control. And we often encourage to overestimate in those areas when somebody's eating out to account for that. Yeah.
I find that interesting because I suppose, being a busy, I understand that your clients are a lot of the time very busy, high achieving individuals. And so something like meal preparation might be something that they don't have the luxury of time for. So how do you educate them on, ingredients apart from the oils to kind of look out for when they are dining out? Are there any red flags or things that you just say, look, this is a hard no? Or do you allow a bit of flexibility?
So again, it comes down to, how specific somebody wants to be, how aggressive or time bound they are with their outcome of their goal as well, in terms of how much they want to control and how they want to look at each detail. An example would be if somebody is traveling and you stay in a hotel, you can often make special requests. Like, hotels are there to serve you and to give you a good experience. Our clients will typically stay in nice hotels. So it's quite easy to then say, actually prepare this in a certain way, or prepare this with less oil or no butter, or make special requests that then just steam the vegetables as opposed to fry them. There's different ways that can be achieved to still make it enjoyable, but not have the extra calories that are not so necessary. In Asia, where we typically have helpers as well, then there's an education there where it's, often, a helper will be trying to make the meal as tasty as possible, and oils and things like that can be overused to, encourage that outcome.
Yeah.
But again, a strong communication of specific, recipes or measures can help that. Yeah. We have our own UP cookbook as well.
Okay.
So we have lots of different recipes within that. So that's another way that we can educate or provide solutions to our clients. So
in a perfect world, would they be, eating at home and preparing most of their meals at home and, batch cooking or doing meal preparation for a week? What would an ideal situation be for to hit these, targets that they have?
So I think, that would be the perfect world, and that would be quite common where people would eat some of their meals certainly from home, and that would be, an area that we can then control and really kind of get on top of. In the real world, though, there will be, of course, the travel piece, there will be eating out, there will be other pieces to control. So in those scenarios, then it's an education. Okay, if we can really stay on top of the bit that we have complete control over at home and we know exactly what's in there, then that gives us a clear understanding of what's left as a buffer throughout the day. And then that allows you to be more flexible and have those funner meals or those kind of, those less clear, kind of calorie loads.
I'm mindful that you have outlets, you've got Hong Kong, but you also have outlets in the Middle East and other parts of the world, including the UK.
Correct.
It's a very generalized question, but do you see a difference in like the level of awareness around what is a whole food diet versus, convenience foods, say between the UK and here or elsewhere? Do you see very different like approaches to eating in the different markets?
It's quite different in each location. So, we're in Australia, for example, in Sydney, we have a gym there. There's such great produce, many of which you obviously provide. And it's, a different way of life, I guess, where, that is on their doorstep and there's perhaps more of a culture to cook themselves there. If you come to somewhere like Hong Kong or Singapore or Dubai, then having help at home is quite common. So obviously there's an education there, but often again, people will still eat at home. Somewhere like the UK, I think there's a big variety there, I guess, between people's preferences and then what's realistic with their time. We also have gyms in the US as well. So it's very kind of different based on location.
It's interesting because I think as Australians, like we benefit from all this fresh produce, and you take it for granted. And it's not until I've been here for 12 years, as you, and just realizing that you don't have that seasonality, the access to potentially fresh produce as we know it, and I think you are instinctively, very well versed in what it means to eat whole foods. And so I find it very exciting to see that Singapore in particular has really kind of like upped the ante in terms of like looking at what it is that they're eating, where it's come from, how it's prepared. We talk about oils and stuff, but there's obviously like the sugar and the salt that also goes into pre-prepared or meals cooked that are not from home. So you obviously train a wide variety of people across all different spectrums of life. Is there a different approach between the men and women that you see? Do you try and cater, their diet and needs between, a woman that's looking at doing, trying to reduce her body fat versus a male? Is it like for like, or are they very different?
So all of the approaches are goal specific to the client. The main difference, if we were to generalize between the male and female clients, would be typically, the average starting weight change, and then that would then guide some of the recommendations that we'd make. But the general themes would be around the amount of protein that we'd encourage somebody to eat, obviously then breaking that down into a sensible breakdown of fat and carbohydrates as well. Again, in some cases, we look to reduce carbohydrates. In other cases, that's not necessary. Again, it's looking to work with a client on what's realistic and what their goal is. But, a pretty consistent theme will always be to ensure that there's a healthy amount of protein in that diet, because that's going to help with feeling full. It's going to help with recovery between their workouts. It's going to help them build and at a minimum preserve muscle mass as well. We obviously, when somebody's looking to lose body fat, they're probably going to be in a calorie deficit, and that's going to then potentially limit their, that's going to potentially impact the muscle loss that they come if they don't eat enough protein and they're not doing weight training. So that's a really important component.
So if I'm, training with you and I'm looking at, how much protein I should be eating in a day, and I'm like, right, well, I will just have like one piece of eye fillet at lunch or at dinner. Am I going to be hitting my goal?
As a general rule, that's probably not quite enough, and based on what we would recommend. Again, it is always person by person, but we would look to, base our recommendations on the amount of lean body mass that somebody has. So we do various assessments at the beginning of the process with our clients, and that allows us to understand their overall weight on the scale, and also their body fat percentage. And then when you use those two numbers, you can work out how much lean body mass, which is muscle and other things within the body. And then from that, we make a recommendation of how much protein somebody should eat. But it's often people will feel like they're eating more than they were before because the protein intake will be encouraged to increase.
Really?
As a generalization, people will typically eat less protein than they should, and they'll eat too many carbohydrates.
Okay.
So then it's a slight rebalance of that.
Yeah.
Again, if you're reducing processed foods, if you're reducing these unhealthy snacks throughout the day, and you're looking to eat whole foods, you're looking to eat more protein-based diet, then actually you feel fuller for longer. You actually, have more quality in your food, and that can become a process to be able to actually eat more of the right thing.
And why would I feel fuller for longer?
So when you eat protein, again, very simplistically, your blood sugar level is more balanced and maintained.
Yep.
Typically speaking, when you eat carbohydrates, you get the blood sugar spike, but what goes up must come down. So then that's where the kind of snacking goes throughout the day, where you're on this roller coaster. So managing blood sugar is one of the key components of a successful body composition nutrition plan, and also keeping somebody on point. So rather than sneaking for the snack or having the coffee and cake, when you hit the crash, it's having that more balanced energy throughout the day. And increased energy is one of the big byproducts of what clients give us feedback on, which goes beyond the visual.
I love the sound of that, because I think a lot of people, when it comes to glucose and glucose monitoring and blood sugar crashes, I think a lot of people brush it off and be like, well, that's for people that are diabetic. That doesn't relate to me. But in fact, that's not the case, right? It relates to everyone. And we can all fall into this trap of having glucose spikes and dips, I guess, throughout the course of the day. So how do we avoid that other than, as you said, having meals that have got protein in it? Is there other kind of tips and tricks along the way that you can do to kind of lower those peaks and troughs?
So you'll have heard of potentially the glycemic index, and you can choose things that perhaps have a lower level on that. However, eating protein with a meal, and that doesn't mean you cannot eat carbohydrates, but eating carbohydrates on their own will create the biggest spike. Eating carbohydrates with protein will give you a more balanced curve often. So again, there's a balance to be found there, but that would be the most effective. And as you mentioned with diabetes, obviously on the road to becoming diabetic, you have to kind of go through this roller coaster and eat the wrong things for an extended period of time. So again, it's trying to get ahead of that. Unfortunately, we see in the world that there's more and more health issues. There's more and more of these kind of issues that people are facing. The positive side is there's more conversations happening around that. There's a lot more education. Obviously, something like longevity has been talked about an awful lot at the moment, which is a great thing for the nutrition and the health and fitness industry, because then there's hopefully going to be much better choices made and more participation within that.
If I'm on the roller coaster and I don't know it, how am I best to identify that I am? What are some of the symptoms that I would be experiencing?
So I mentioned the coffee and cake sort of run. So is that, do you have that mid-afternoon spike? If you've had a heavy carb-focused lunch, is that 2 to 4 o'clock slot where, you've had a busy day, the blood sugar is now starting to crash after lunch, and you've got a habit where you always reach for something at that point. So then is it over-caffeinating later in the day, which might impact sleep? Or is it, eating unnecessary calories potentially in that window to try and bring you back up? So that would be a common one, but it comes through conversations. So similar to what we're having now, there'll be a conversation to understand what's your normal day look like, what are the habits that you typically follow, and then we start to understand the trends that come there and how we can make changes.
I love the idea about longevity medicine and doing things now to kind of future-proof yourself. I guess that's a big philosophy for UP as well, in that you are not just setting up yourself for success for a short-term goal, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're trying to create a lifestyle change and a habit that potentially can sustain you throughout the rest of your years. Do you find that a lot of the people that come on the protocol and make that shift from, be it processed food to like a whole living diet, that it's something that they can sustain once they are conscious of the changes that they've gone through, not only, physically, mentally? Is it something that they then continue on with?
Absolutely. And I think with any goal, with any sort of, focus or project, there can be a sort of peak or a point that you work towards. So the visual transformations, the photo shoots, the things like that. If you do a marathon or you do some sort of sporting event, you're peaking for these events, you're peaking for these moments, and you learn a lot about yourself. There's a lot of achievement and accomplishment as part of that, and you learn a lot of things throughout that process. Now, then, as you mentioned, longer term, the goal is then how are some of the things that I've learned to get me here, things that I can incorporate quite happily into my diet. If you've been eating processed food and you change it for more higher quality protein, that's quite an easy change to make, and it doesn't need to dramatically influence too many other things in your diet. If it's going to be in a restaurant, again, it's just making better choices. It doesn't mean you can't go to the restaurant, it just means you make better choices to control that over time. And again, then like we talk about maintenance and things like that, so then you can obviously pull things back a little bit and you can find a sweet spot to have more flexibility. But because you've done a lot of the hard work, you've improved your body composition, you're training regularly, built some muscle, you're more active in general, then that actually allows you to do more. And you'll probably see, obviously there's a genetic component, but you'll see people that are fit and healthy or very active or sports people, they can eat certain things, they can eat unhealthy things and they don't put on weight. But again, there's this buffer from a muscle mass or an activity perspective that allows for that. If we think longer term though, that's where some of the choices of the food and having higher quality food is really important though.
And you're a father as well. How old are your kids?
So 2 kids, I've got one that's 5 and the other's 4.
Okay. And how much of what you're doing, with UP then also translates to your home life?
Yeah, it's really
They're
interesting.
obviously very young.
But for me, they're not pumping weights every morning or anything like that. They're not planning on competing anytime soon. But it's trying to lead by example, trying to encourage good habits. Especially at the weekends where we spend more time together. Then it's just trying to be active, whether it's we can go for a bike ride or swimming or a walk. It's just encouraging the healthy habits and making it fun. That's the most important thing when it's children. That there can be structure and they go to martial arts classes and there's good discipline and structure there, but also trying to find ways to make that process fun. And then from a food perspective, again, definitely my influence that all meals will have protein, they'll have good quality meat or fish involved. And it's quite an expensive hobby, I guess, where like there's pictures of my kids and they're pretty young with like a lamb sort of chop in their mouth, something like that. But they've got a taste for it quite early on. And I guess like many children in Singapore, they're living quite a different childhood to I did in Scotland.
Yeah, but at the same time, an investment in their food now, I guess, pays dividends down the line.
That's the hope, and I'm sure there's different factors involved, but they're big and healthy and strong relative to their peers in lots of cases, so they're definitely growing well, they're definitely kind of fit and healthy, thankfully, and I think strong nutrition is definitely in part of that.
And then you individually, like how do you manage everything? I'm sure there's a certain element you have to talk the talk and walk the walk. Is that the right way to say it? But yeah, how do you balance everything? You've got travel on your schedule as well. So do you live and breathe the same things that you teach? Is that kind of come naturally to you, or is it a bit of a struggle?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to lie that it's not always easy, and there definitely is challenges. I think for me, the most consistent and easy thing to implement is the food choices and the good quality protein in each meal, where throughout the day you're having that as part of your diet, as part of the kind of core construct of the meals. And then around that, then it's more about, I spend a lot of time, obviously on the computer, on calls, on meetings. So it's just making sure that I'm as active as I'd like to be, because, as a background as a personal trainer years ago, then I was on the gym floor and on my feet all day long. So that was the biggest transition where I needed to obviously account for that and be mindful there. And then it also comes down to, like we mentioned, that long-term focus where I've done the photo shoots, I've done, the pushing it in that direction. And for me now, it's more of a kind of a long-term sustainable thing where I'm eating well, I'm exercising regularly, but I'm also focusing on the business, I'm focusing on my family, I'm traveling regularly. So again, it doesn't have to be, pushing it to a certain level, to achieve that.
You mentioned photo shoots.
Yeah.
So obviously there's an aesthetic, that people are probably looking for. How do you make sure that when they do these transformations, it's a positive impact, physically, but I guess mentally as well, because they've seen this huge shift. They're probably very buoyed by their achievement. Making sure that relationship with food is maintained at a healthy level, because obviously you can run into the idea of doing crash dieting, which is not something you are proponents for, but how do you make sure that relationship is a positive one?
For sure. I think a lot of the positive outcomes will be that increase in confidence that somebody will come in and they'll often not be feeling good about certain things, or like say their health or their body composition will have got to a point that they're not comfortable with because they focus on their career, etc. So going through this journey is often very positive for the fact that they're then back in control of their body again. They feel good, they feel healthy. You can see it from the clothes that people wear. People start to wear tighter fitting clothes, or shorter dresses or whatever else, so that they start to feel good about their the changes they've made there.
Yeah.
And then that education is really important, so that they understand, okay, how do we kind of continue this? Obviously, this is an endpoint we're working towards. It could also be a wedding, it could also be a birthday or a holiday or a photo shoot. But again, it's okay, now we're getting to this point, then how do we continue this on? How do we have other goals? Because it's really important we have goals in all aspects of life, and that's a big part of the process, where initially it can be an endpoint, but then, as I mentioned earlier, it's that transition to, okay, we're going to focus on getting even stronger now. It's so exciting to see when someone does their first pull-up, or somebody, squats their body weight, or somebody's able to do a movement that was previously causing lots of pain, and now they're able to do that, freely. And then that's where you get the excitement, and that's where you get the long-term piece, because you never complete this game. I think that's a really important piece to remember, that with the gym, with exercise, with health and fitness, it's got to be an ongoing process. You can't just do it for a period of time and then mission complete, see you later. It's not a course, it's not a certification, it's something that we need to be consistent with. So then it's really a case of, how do we keep this exciting? How do we change the goals, make it interesting, to keep people engaged?
Do you do goal setting together, or do you allow the person to kind of set them themselves and then you work on them, I guess, together? Because I think, if you have somebody encouraging you is one thing, but to be able to set a realistic one is another, because you would hate to, set the bar so high that you ultimately, didn't achieve it. So
sure.
How do you make sure that it's something that is not just achievable, but I guess realistic?
So you've mentioned lots of the words that are part of the SMART sort of format. So we definitely use that approach so that it is, something that we can measure. We can also then make it realistic, and there's a time frame as well is also important. But I think, we'll definitely, ask our clients what their goals are. We're not imposing our goals on anyone. It's more of a case of, what do you want to achieve? But it's also interesting that you often don't know what you can achieve. Like, you don't know what you don't know. And often if someone's confidence is low because of where they're at when they come into a process, then actually, I just want to lose a few kilos and I'll be happy with that. And with our experience, we are confident that they can do significantly more, or, this weight on a certain exercise, I think that's as much as I can do. And then bit by bit, they get stronger and stronger, because with experience that you can safely increase that. And I think that's the key part, where a personal trainer that's very invested in the client's goals and experience will be able to then get more out of somebody. And that's the same with any coach, that you're trying to get more than what they thought was possible, and achieve a greater outcome.
You said you don't know what you don't know, which is one of my favorite sayings, because I often feel like I'm in that situation. Just surrounding yourself with the right people is so important, be it in your personal life, in business life, in your relationships with friends. I guess that would also cross over with the trainers that you have. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but that would be a very intimate one-on-one relationship that is potentially there for a number of weeks, a number of months, potentially a lifetime. Do you go through a bit of a screening process that it's like, well, Chris is not the right personal trainer for Amy, but, Damien might be?
Absolutely. So all clients that want to join UP will do a consultation before they come through the process. And, they've inquired, they've reached out to us, and that process from our perspective is largely to get to know their goals and get to know their personality, because for us it's really important the allocation of trainer, so that there's a good fit. And it can be based on personality, it can be based on their specific goals, it could be based on an injury or some sort of specific factor. And then we're able to really ensure that that relationship is strong. Because as you mentioned, like the name personal trainer suggests, it's a personal experience.
Yeah.
It's a very focused one. And we do have a team at UP, so that's one of the other key points to note, that while you have an individual point person, if the trainer is on holiday or unwell for a short period of time, then we hire a team. So the team are able to step in. There's records of everything. We've got a consistent way we're able to deliver things. So we're able to then support that client. So there's continuity in their training. That's really important. Consistency is key. And as I mentioned earlier, also they can travel to other gyms within the world that we have UP, so we can support there. We do virtual training, which was born out of the pandemic, but we're able to obviously continue to offer that for clients that travel or want to take that upon. So there's different ways that we can support. And then there's mentors, there's managers, there's regional managers, there's various people behind the scenes that are supporting the client journey, the product that we deliver.
It sounds like a very, very big business, and one that is hard to no doubt keep on top of. When it comes to, I guess, social media, what role do you think it plays in education, and particularly around, protein consumption, meat? Do you find that there's a place for education in social media, or is it just full of misinformation?
Look, there's a lot of choice, certainly. There's lots of information out there. I think there's lots of great things out there. And, with the social media, with the age that we're in, there's just endless choice that you can, get your, source of information from, whether it be ChatGPT these days, whether it be a social media platform, there's going to be a way to get the answer. I think, as you mentioned, then it's trying to understand what's right and wrong, what's right for me. And that's where experience, a trainer that's able to then think, okay, this is your story, this is where you're at, this is the goal, this is the best approach to take. That's, perhaps AI hasn't got to that stage just yet, where it's kind of, it knows all that nuance, or it's able to really support based on that piece.
Are you excited by the changes with AI? Is it something that you're embracing, or are you nervous about? Because obviously that level of personalization, it's learning about us all the time. Do you feel like it's going to shift the way that we look at, training and food and, just everything around nutrition?
For sure. I think it's definitely going to, become bigger and bigger part of our lives. It's something that I use, and I think there's lots of ways to use it to make your life more efficient and more effective. I'm very confident, though, that in terms of the personalized approach that we take, the human element of the connection that you build, the guidance, and also in the gym training and experience, like making sure someone's training safely, effectively, someone's able to, obviously progress at a sensible speed. Like, again, I don't think we're going to get to that stage anytime soon where that can replace a very experienced trainer to develop that.
You mentioned that sometimes people will come with you with an injury, and then they can, I think it was the reference to a pull-up. So do you have rehabilitation as part of the program as well? Because I guess that's, building into a longevity kind of, we're here to do it forever. Is that part of the program for you guys, making sure that this is something that you can continue to do indefinitely?
Absolutely. So when we assess somebody at the beginning of the process, we'll look at how they move, we'll understand if there's any imbalances, if there's any injuries we should be aware of. And that's then how we decide on the most appropriate exercises for someone. It could be a case that there's certain movements that are just not suitable for that person because of an injury or because of their body shape and size. And it's a case of then setting them up for success, because we want to be able to challenge somebody in the gym to help them get fitter and stronger, to be able to work towards a goal as quickly as possible. That's a relative term. But we also then need to make sure that the selection is key and that it's sensible. And that's a big part of it. Whereas, in lots of cases, people will just have the same program for everybody, or they'll do, everybody's got to squat or deadlift, but that's not always the safest and most effective way. And then just to fully answer that question, I guess, then on that journey, as somebody starts to move better, improve their body composition, be fitter and healthier in general, then that can often improve a lot of these issues. Quite often it's imbalances, so it's not necessarily an injury, it's just a weakness in certain areas. So strengthening certain parts of the body that are been, overlooked in the past. And then it's a case of developing that and bringing in new exercises over time.
It's funny, movement and flexibility. I'm fortunate that I am of short stature, but my husband is extremely inflexible. And I have to laugh because we went to a friend's place for dinner a couple of years ago and we walked into their apartment and I was like, where is their dining table? And they actually had cut the legs off their dining table to make it the same height as a coffee table. And I was like, what is going on here? And the whole philosophy was that we should all be able to sit on the ground, you know, and over the course of an hour, you're naturally going to be moving position. You're sitting on one leg, you shift to the other. And you should have seen how uncomfortable he was because he was so unaccustomed to being sitting on the ground. And further to this, the couple that hosted us, you know, over the course of the night, we tested ourselves. And I will say that there was 1 or 2 drinks involved, but you had to try and get off the floor without using your arms. Yeah. So how much physical strength have you actually got? You might look strong, but are you mobile enough and flexible enough to get yourself off the floor? Anyway, I digress.
No, it's a really important point. And, you know, like Peter Attia is quite a well-known speaker in this area around longevity, but he talks about, you know, especially as you age, and, you know, these are quite important, you know, components of whether you're truly, you know, healthy or able to live your life. You know, can you easily get up from a chair, or can you walk in certain, you know, upstairs in different distances? You know, are you able to control your own body weight? And obviously, if you fall over, can you get up, or can you prevent yourself from falling? Like, these are all increasingly important things as you age, and having that higher level of strength and muscle mass to begin with is a big part of that.
Brian Johnson. The name rings a bell, yeah. Is he a good case study for ultimate performance, do you think? Is he taken things too far, or do you think that there is, you know, elements of truth in what his protocol is?
Look, I think anybody that's shining a light on how to live a healthier lifestyle, you know, optimize yourself in different ways, like the biohacking and all the different things, you know, that have been talked about more and more over the last few years, I think it's all part of a healthy discussion, and it's all, you know, shining a light on the right things. You know, it's encouraging people to look after what they eat and, you know, their activity levels, their sleep, managing stress. These are all really important things to live a healthy lifestyle. So, you know, whether, you know, one person's got the right idea or not, or whether one person's gone too far or the other, I think it's more, as with any information, as you said earlier, it's taking what's right for you if you're going to do it yourself, and then building that protocol that really works and is realistic to you, or having somebody or an experienced person to devise that plan based on their experience.
360, I guess, is what you're saying. You know, you've got your sleep, your stress, your diet, your exercise. I'm sure there's a 5th one there. But just making sure that it's a holistic kind of approach to health and longevity. I liked Brian's philosophy around divorcing what he calls the monarch, which is your brain, and making sure that you start making decisions based on what your body actually needs, not what your brain is telling you should have. So, you know, should I reach for a carbonated sugary drink, or should I just have that glass of water? Should I have the, you know, burger from, you know, a fast food store, or should I go home and make my own? So I guess all choices that we can make, and just making those little ones each day, is all going to benefit us in the long term.
Absolutely. And you mentioned there, you know, around managing blood sugars and things earlier, but, you know, often when somebody feels hungry, they're dehydrated as well. That's quite common in Singapore, of all places. You know, you even more need to be mindful of that, where, you know, water intake, but also electrolyte balance as well is quite important if we're in such a hot and humid country. Yeah,
you're not wrong. I catch myself doing that all the time, feeling like I'm hungry and realizing, actually, no, I haven't had a sip of water. There you go. Cheers.
And that's another good thing about talking about these things. It reminds you or encourages you to make better choices or habits. It's like when people talk about slouching, you just happen to sit upright.
You did it before in that area. I was like, oh, am I slouching?
But it's all part of a healthy conversation. I think the more we hear or more people talk about healthy habits, the more likely people are going to engage, start to explore what that means for them, and take them on a journey.
I think it's almost normalizing it. I know that when I was a young kid, I was diagnosed with a condition called Candida. It's quite a young age. And the list of foods that I could not eat was longer than the list of the foods that I could eat. And for a young girl at the time who was, enjoying life, that was a huge setback for me. remember crying to my mum. And I had the good fortune where she just said to me, right, Amy, we'll go to the local health food store. You can choose anything from here. And I'm so grateful for that experience, because even though it was a negative, like most things, it turned into a huge positive. Whereas my girlfriends were bringing, a jam sandwich to school, I was bringing, chicken pesto pasta. Yeah. And they were extremely jealous of me to the point that they wanted to take my lunch. And I was like, no, this is mine.
And that's often the case that, healthy food is often tastier, right? It actually has more to offer when it's got good protein, vegetables, and I think that's quite a nice
flavor
story.
Profile. Yeah. Well, before you go, I have a quick question. You've got an option to put 3 products into your Meat Club delivery. What are they going to be?
Yeah, so I guess if I'm going for what I would enjoy the most, then I'm going to have to pick the fattier options. I'm not saying this is the healthiest option, but I guess it's a case of ribeye steak, definitely be in there. Lamb rack, because the kids love it, so you've got to keep them sweet. And then have to have some fish in there, so a snapper fillet.
Amazing. Oh, thank you. And how do our listeners find you?
Cool. So, we have 2 gyms in Singapore. We have one in the CBD at the Manulife Tower. We're also in Orchard Road, as you mentioned, an international building, the same as you. In terms of contacting me directly, I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to find me.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to What is on Your Plate. If you enjoyed today's episode, give us a like, leave a comment, or subscribe to our YouTube for more content like this. And if you're ready to fill your plate with clean, quality produce, please check out themeatclub.com.sg. We deliver straight to your door so you can eat well every day. See you on the next episode.